Well, hello 1020 fans, and a welcome to my video. And in this first video, I'm going to talk to you about good old paper 2. I know you're excited. So if you want to follow along with me, click on content up at the top of our Brightspace course page. Click on major paper assignments and related materials, and then click on paper 2 assignment sheet. Yay! So, paper 2, we're entering into our unit on poetry, and I know that some of you are a little upset about that, but it's okay, I promise. Paper 2 is an explication of poetry, and that is just a fancy word that means explanation. So every time you hear that explication, think explanation. So it explains and interprets the poem in order to demonstrate a clear understanding and interpretation of its details, its underlying meaning, so its theme, right? The techniques that the poet is using to produce meaning and content, and anything else about that poem that seems unique or important. So for this paper, you'll write a general explication/explanation of a poem we've studied together in Unit 2, this unit on poetry, that develops a central idea as expressed in your thesis statement. And if you're confused about where Unit 2 is, look in the syllabus, and obviously everything in Unit 2, it begins on the day paper 1 is due, and it ends on the day that paper 2 is due. That's Unit 2. So any reading in there is fair game. So here are the important dates that you need to remember. Wednesday, the 27th of October is our idea workshop for paper 2. So you'll click on the assignments tab up at the top of our Brightspace course page, and you'll look for idea worksheet for paper 2, and you'll follow the instructions there, and you want to submit before 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, the 27th. And by the way, I have on my pumpkin sweater. I just want y'all to see the little pumpkins on my pumpkin sweater because I'm all about it. I love holidays, and I like decorating, and I like wearing orange at Halloween and all kinds of things like that. Monday, the 1st of November, is our pre-writing for paper 2. So you'll post in the week 11 pre-writing for paper 2 discussion board and kind of kill two birds with one stone there, as they say. You know, it's a terrible saying, but essentially you'll be fulfilling your discussion board requirement there as well as your pre-writing. So you'll submit a pre-written intro and thesis and an outline with 3 main points for my feedback into that board before 11:59 p.m. on Monday night. So that's the, we're not used to that Monday. We're used to Wednesday and Sunday. But this will be Monday night, the 1st. So go to discussions and look for the week 11 pre-writing for paper 2 discussion board. And the reason it hits on a Monday is because it's a major paper assignment, and I have to have time to turn it around and respond to all of you. So remember that 10 points are deducted from your paper 2 grade if you fail to submit that pre-writing material by the deadline. And then Monday, the 8th of November, the final draft of paper 2 is due no later than 11:59 p.m. So a lot of times with the major papers, there are Monday deadlines, as I say. After you've gotten the feedback from me on your pre-writing, your intro, your thesis, and outline, submit the final draft via the assignments tab. So you're going to look for paper 2, final draft. And remember again, the policy about papers, 10 points are deducted from your paper grade for every calendar day that the paper is late. And that includes the day that it's due and weekends. And I do not accept papers after 5 days unless you've provided me with a valid reason and you've been excused or received an extension, I should say. So the specifics, this paper should be at least 3 pages long, so 3 to 4 pages in length, but at least a minimum of 3 full pages in length. If you don't meet that minimum page length requirement, you're going to have point deductions. If you submit a page and a half, you've only written half a paper, so you'll make a 50, and that's an F. So make sure you do it. Typed, double-spaced in Times New Roman 12-point font. Be sure you do that with standard margins. For this assignment, you only need to document your main primary source, so that's the poem that you're writing about. I strongly encourage you, though, to add a second source that either offers literary critique of your poem or that comments on some technique that you see at work in the poem, or that comments on the time period or the genre or the author of that poem. And you'll need to incorporate line quotations and paraphrases, either or, really quotations are better, citing both within the body of your paper and on a separate works cited page using MLA formatting, of course. So your goal in paper 2 is to write a careful explanation of a poem of your choosing, as long as it's listed on the syllabus in Unit 2. So Unit 2 began Monday the 4th of October. It ends on the day that the final draft of paper 2 is due. Note every technique the poet is using. Review the Elements of Poetry handout, which I'm going to talk about in my second video here. And also pay careful attention to and address matters like symbolism, sound, rhythm, meter, things like that, if it's important. And finally, be sure to address, and this is very important, how your chosen poem reveals the author's main theme. Theme is always the most important thing we're talking about in literature. So to create a successful paper, here are some questions that you should ask yourself as you're writing. Have I chosen a poem listed in Unit 2 of our syllabus? If it's not listed there, then I can't accept it. Have I written a compelling thesis statement? So for example, your thesis should say something more meaningful than the poem Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden is very beautiful, because that doesn't make a claim that anyone could really agree or disagree with, first of all. And you're using a vague word, beautiful. So you're not telling us how it's beautiful or why it's beautiful or why it matters. What about it is beautiful? You're using a fluff word, very. Just get rid of those fluff words. You don't need them. Have I checked my topic sentences? So the first sentence of each paragraph is called your topic sentence. To be sure I'm making points of analysis rather than just summarizing the poem. So you don't want to just tell us what happens in the poem. You want to tell us what it means, how it reveals the theme. You're explaining it. You're not just telling us what happened. So for example, avoid topic sentences like the following that simply summarize what happens in the poem without offering any connection to theme or symbolism or techniques. Next, the narrator discusses how cold it is in the house before his father lights the fire. Finally, he asks what he knows about love. Well, I mean, that's all well and good and true. That's what happens in the poem. But you need to connect into how that reveals what the theme is, why it's important. Does my introductory paragraph have a hook? So are you beginning with a hook, a line that reels your reader in, that makes your reader want to keep reading? And it might be a quote that connects somehow. It might be an interesting fact. It might be a question, avoid first person I or you if it's a question. Have I included the following information in my intro? The title of the work, correctly punctuated. Poetry titles are placed in quotation marks, generally speaking. The full name of the author and the reason the poem has some meaning, my thesis statement, my main claim that I'm making. Have I remembered? Poetry titles are almost always placed in quotation marks because they're shorter works. So get that rule in your head. Shorter work titles, like a title of a short story or a poem, are placed in quotation marks. Titles of longer works, like a book, are placed in italics. Have I remembered to refer to the author by last name only after I have introduced him or her fully in my introductory paragraph? So, I cannot say, my good buddy Flannery, Ms. O'Connor, right? No, I wouldn't be writing about her anyway in the poetry unit, but I would say just O'Connor, the last name, because that's standard college protocol. Have I used literary present tense? And again, that's an idea that throws us off a little bit. But remember, since literature can be read again and again, stories and characters always exist perpetually. So we use present tense to refer to the actions and to the characters. So for example, the speaker in Barbie Doll uses sarcasm at the end of the poem when wishing a happy ending to every woman. So I didn't say used sarcasm, past tense. I say uses, like it's happening right now. That's literary present tense. Have I used formal academic language? I'm not going to use first person I and you and your and words like stuff and thing, vague words. Thing and good and bad. I'm going to be specific and I'm going to be formal. I'm a college writer. Do I have correct in-text citations? So line quotations or paraphrased ideas in MLA that are cited. I have to have a separate works cited page in MLA formatting. Have I been careful not to plagiarize? I have to document. I have to cite all my sources. Have I included quotes from my chosen work and remember to incorporate them smoothly by introducing them with a phrase? Have I used diagonal marks to separate lines in a poem when I quote, placing a space both before and after each diagonal? And I give you an example. The poet describes Sundays when his father, quote, got up early, space, diagonal space, and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold, end quote, parenthesis, Hayden, comma, lines 1-2, in parenthesis, period. Remember, my period goes after the parenthesis in MLA, not at the end of the quote itself. And so the first time I'm quoting from poetry, I'm going to have that comma after the author's last name in my in-text citation and the word line or lines. But after that, all I need is the author's last name and the line number or numbers. I don't need a comma with it either, or the word line or lines. Do I have a fully developed intro, body, and conclusion? Have I answered the question, so what and who cares? So what about this poem? Why should we care about it? And have I included an analysis of the poet's language, rhythm, tone, style, any other important techniques? And again, you want to refer back to that Elements of Poetry sheet that I'm going to talk about in my other video for this week. So now I give you examples of a possible thesis and game plan for paper 2. So here's the first example. In Marge Piercy's iconic poem, Barbie Doll, notice how the comma is put inside the quotation marks right there. That is an error that so many writers make in 1010 and 1020. The comma is not going to go outside the quotation marks. It almost always goes inside. So in Marge Piercy's iconic poem, Barbie Doll, a cold, sterile speaker tells the story of a girl child who is bullied over her large nose and legs. By carefully explicating the connotations of the poet's language, along with the symbolism used, one may derive Piercy's theme. Societal pressures to achieve a perfect physical appearance can lead to tragedy. So see how this writer has used the terminology that we're learning, explicating, connotations. So connotative meaning, all the associations we make with words, right? The poet's language. Symbolism, right? Theme. So all those words we're learning. So for a thesis like this, you'll need to carefully consider every word of Piercy's poem. What are the figurative, the connotative meanings behind the words? What associations are we making with them? How do the analogies compare to each other? How are they similar? How are they different? You'll also need to consider things like the lack of rhyme. This poem is free verse. How does that affect the poem? What would this poem have been like if it had rhymed? It wouldn't have been maybe as meaningful, right? Along with that sterile tone of the voice of the narrator that just drives the poem, mirroring society's cold, sterile attitude toward anyone who doesn't fit into its standards of perfect beauty, right? And you might talk about the settings used in uncovering the author's underlying themes. Here's a second example. Theodore Rothke's lyrical poem, so that tells us what kind of poem this is. My Papa's Waltz describes the dance the speaker engages in with his alcoholic father as he attempts to navigate his need for fatherly love from a man who is clearly abusive. A thoughtful explication of the poet's word choice, use of symbolism, and rhyming techniques will reveal Rothke's primary theme: the need for love outweighs every other human longing. So, see how this writer has told us what kind of poem this is? It's lyrical. So, it's focused on emotion, right? And he tells us the title, he tells us the author's name, he tells us what's happening, that we have an alcoholic father and a son who really desperately wants his father's love, but his father is abusive. And so then we have the thesis, a thoughtful explication of the poet's word choice, use of symbolism, and rhyming techniques reveals the theme. And the writer gives us the theme. Theme is always something we want to talk about. So this thesis has laid out a game plan. This thesis has said, guess what? I'm going to talk about word choice. I'm going to give you examples of some of the words that Rothke chooses to use in this poem and why they matter and how they reveal theme. I'm going to talk about Rothke's use of symbolism. I'm going to discuss that with you in a paragraph. I'm going to talk about the rhyming techniques, right? So you've got to demonstrate through quotes and paraphrases how the little boy in that poem continues to long for his dad's love despite that abuse that both he and his mother are enduring. And you've got to consider every word in the poem along with the connotative meanings, the associations we make with that wording. And looking carefully at the symbolism of the poem, you want to think, okay, is it universal? Is this symbolism that everyone could identify with? Is it cultural? Is it just sort of unique to one culture? Is it contextual, sort of happening within a certain framework of time? Or is it all of the above? And then how does the symbol of waltzing, of the dance, help to solidify the idea that the dance between father and son is actually a recounting of physical abuse? So it defies your expectation there. You're not thinking of a dance as being something horrible and abusive. How does the rhyme used in the poem mirror the timing of a dance, of a waltz? So those are the basics there for paper 2. And I will see you in my next little video. I'm going to break them up because they're kind of long, the elements of poetry, but you need to watch it, because if you don't watch it, you won't do well.